the 19th century, one of the questions that emerged, at least from European minds and from North American minds, is why the others of the world were the way they are. Why are other people like the way they are? And we talked about, in the last class, we talked about how a common answer to this from the European and US perspective was, well, people are the way they are because of their race. We talked a little bit also about how people said that people were determined by their physical environment, or whether it snows, or whether it rains, or whether it's too hot for culture, which seems to be the case at Hartwick. But in this class, and that's an important question, in this class we're though going to be more focused on the idea of race, because I think that has stuck with us perhaps more than the other idea. We're not so worried about that as much anymore. So the idea was that your race, your biology, your genetics were kind of this unchanging thing that you had and determined the course of your life. Now, what I said is that was a convenient thing for these Europeans who simply were going out and thinking that they were asking this question for the first time in the 19th century, because it justified and made natural, or made it feel natural, these kinds of hierarchies of race and class and ethnocentric hierarchies, the idea that our way is right and your way is wrong, that had been created from the 16th century to the 18th century. 19th? No, 18th. Anyway, I'm using the years here. Basically from the time of Columbus, Americas, to before even the 19th century began, before those great changes. And so things like the enslavement of Africans and dragging them to the Americas in order to mostly to grow sugar for the coffee that was also being produced, and the tea and all those things. A lot of that had already happened before anybody went out and became an anthropologist. In fact, anthropology was relatively late on the scene. And so it seemed natural, or it was taken to be this sort of natural order of things, but it was an order that had been created hundreds of years before this schemata developed. Oh, before the idea of evolution, Charles Darwin, those things. Yes. What I claimed, borrowing on the work of Trouillot, is that culture was more exciting. It was more exciting than a 5.3, a 5.6, or even a 7 back in the day, when culture was deployed as this anti-idea, an anti-concept to the idea of biological race. And so that was an exciting time for culture, because culture was seen as this dynamic thing, or was tried to be portrayed as dynamic, something that could change. And if that's true, if culture is something we learn, and it's learned patterns of behavior, then those global hierarchies and the ethnocentrism that was so prevalent is not justified. In fact, it might even be wrong, might be incorrect. And so we talked about how for some of the early anthropologists, this became a huge rallying cry, you might say. Yes, Shay.
Is an anti-concept, is it just like something that denounces another thing? So it's like another concept, so it's like the concept.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Does it target it, or does it just like in general?
I think that in this case, we would say that culture was taken as something that could then target and take the place of race as an explanation. So, in some ways, I think what Trouillot is saying is it wasn't so much what culture was that was important. It wasn't this whole definition of culture that we struggle with today. It was what culture wasn't. It was what it could target and displace as your explanatory idea. And so you march in with this thing that's, it's a fighting word. And that's why people were excited about it. Whereas on Tuesday, we couldn't get excited about it because we weren't having any fights. We were like, oh, culture's this, culture's that. Everybody has it. It's everything. I mean, who can get excited about a concept that's like, it's your whole way of life, it's everything? I mean, that's not exciting. We should just call it life. But it is exciting if you can say, no, this thing that you had, which was causing you to think in a weird way about other people and be dismissive and a jerk, if that's wrong and I'm coming in with this other way of thinking, then I'm excited. And I feel like I'm doing something in the world. I feel like I'm not losing my mind. I feel like I'm having a purpose. I feel like we should be here instead of just lying in the sun outside. Right. So we got there. Now, yeah, now things are new. Things are different. Words are being added. So anthropology got a hold of this idea of culture and really started to promote it. The book Patterns of Culture by Ruth Benedict became a bestseller. People started to come to anthropology classes and actually take them. Hadn't been there before. There were graduate students, there were studies. And people got excited about this word. But as it started to be promoted and become popular, the way it started to get taken in the world, and also for people who were studying anthropology, is that culture started to be something that you had, something that didn't change, and that would determine your life within a group. In fact, Alex, a long time ago on the web, you said that you thought this before, that culture was something you just had, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So this is often the way culture is depicted, as it's just something you have. It's very determining, like, well, that's just their culture, man. They like to take naps in the afternoon when it's hot. That's their culture, the siesta culture. And that, once you're in it, you can't get out of it. Now, answer me this. If I have a word for you that marks you as part of a group that can't really be changed, and it's something you just have, and it basically determines the course of your life, what kind of an idea might that be? What kind of an explanation is that? If now you just have it, you can't change it, and it's determining of your life as part of a group. What does that sound like that we just talked about?
The wrong one?
The wrong one. Yeah, it sounds like the wrong one. A lot of people basically said, oh, I get it, right? We don't call them this, we call them that. And instead of saying it's their race, we say it's their culture. And so you just swap all the terms around, right? Like, is it better to say it's maybe it's a little bit better to say it's culture, but it sounds a lot like race, right? It seems like that old idea that we used to have. So if it's something like that, then it doesn't really help us. Or it loses its anti-concept if you're just kind of substituting it for what you had before, but you're just swapping the words around. And you can look at the history of various words that people call other people, and you'll notice that there's often a culturalization of those words, right? They go from one word that sounds very biological up to something that sounds very culture, and it's like, oh no, we don't call people that, we call them this. Including the word like, white to European American, for example, which is, odd. Anyway, so that's one of the things that happened. And culture actually it basically let people, and maybe even anthropologists, ignore power differences and inequalities within different societies, and perhaps especially between societies. Well, both of these. And in fact, Tiana, you said that before you read this guest chapter in anthropology, and you've done some anthropology before, true, that you had not heard culture and power put together. Am I getting that right? That you'd only heard about power in criminal justice and sociology.
Yeah, so like specific concepts that were in like that part of the chapter, like I've only really, like we only really discussed them when I was like in different classes. I feel like when it came up in anthropology, it was always like when I was having a conversation with a professor or something after when we were talking about something else. So, yeah.
Wow. Well, there you go. I'll take that one example. I mean, it is funny, right? Why is it that in anthropology, why does this happen? Why don't we have more people talking about power within anthropology? You have to go over to sociology to get that, I guess. Scary. It also allowed people to ignore the interconnections, and we talked about this, that anthropologists would sometimes portray these other societies that they were studying as isolated, as not having their own history, as sort of just being locked in this box of culture. And the other thing that kind of happened, and I think has increased, is that people have wanted to kind of narrow down and even make culture into this individual thing that you have. To the extent, Amy, a long time ago, you wrote that you quoted Guest. Guest has to say this. He has to be very explicit about this. No individual has their own culture. Right? So he's trying to fight against this trend of making culture smaller and smaller and tinier, so that, so that it's all your own self. So what happens over time is culture becomes less of a fighting word and more of a word that is basically, it almost becomes the opposite of what it was intended to be, because it takes the place of a deterministic explanation. It's a little bit softer, but not necessarily too much softer than race as a concept. One of the questions that arises in anthropology a lot when we go from the big idea of culture as learned behavior to various cultures is, if we're trying to claim that culture is dynamic and changing and always interconnected, then where does one culture begin and another end, both in time and in space? I mean, this is a problem. And that's why Amy got all angry with Guest in her post. Livid. She was livid because, wait a second. Well, what about the United States? Do we have just one culture? Is there one culture in the United States? Or are we just an amalgamation of different cultures? And then, but if you go along and Guest, and I mean, the thing is, if you look into any group, no matter how small, I mean, think about Harvard College, this little tiny place. Do we have one culture? The Hartwick culture? Probably not. I mean, Guest gives the example of Indian culture. 1.3 billion people, right? I mean, to say that there is one Indian culture is perhaps even more absurd than to claim that there's one US culture. And then in the next little bit, he talks about the Yanomami tribe in South America and, a few thousand people. But again, even if you looked into that group, you'd find these subdivisions and those kinds of things. So the big problem has been, or whenever you get into this idea that there are these cultures in certain places in certain instances, you run the risk of falling back into some of those pretty old explanations and misrepresenting people as much as representing them. So we have come to a point that I would say, or many people would say, I guess, it is true that we hear the word culture all the time, to the extent that we've kind of lost its meaning, certainly anthropological. So it becomes very overused to the extent that it's just trite. And as I told you before, Trouillot's essay was called Adieu Culture, or Goodbye Culture, because he wanted to kind of get rid of the word culture, but keep the idea of culture. And the idea of culture is still important. And it's perhaps especially important even in today's world when people are getting all strange again. We still need to know that people's behavior primarily is not a result of their biology or their genetics or their physical environment, but it's something we learn socially. Some of you, or wait a second, it's something that is shared and contested. So it's something that we share with other people, but we also use it to fight and disagree and argue about things. Some of you got excited about things that Gus mentions, like norms and values, symbols. These are all things that we might share and also contest. Shaylin talked to us about mental maps. Oh, that was a long time ago. Shaylin, you remember about mental maps? What got you excited about mental maps?
I thought it was interesting how he broke it down to like the main functions, and it was like that we classify reality and then we apply meaning to those classifications. And it's just like something that like I thought was interesting, so you can like apply it to really anything. And we applied it to things like ageism or something like that. I'm not sure if it's ageism or just age in general, and how like we have these associations of what an elderly person their meaning and what they do and what they might do, and then compared to like a younger person, how that's like variable based on the culture you're in. So I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, I mean, there are certainly some super interesting things we can find out about how we learn various categories and associate them with people, and then we might what we call stereotype people or put them into categories. And learning that is important because then you can sort of examine yourself, what people call implicit bias or unconscious bias, right? If you have some idea of the mental map that you've been assembling throughout your life, then it can help you. So, although people might say that there is not one US culture, Gus mentions flags. So not everybody agrees on what a flag means or should mean, or if we should get up and be happy. But we do agree that there's something going on with this piece of cloth that we've determined that we might contest and we might be interested in. So there are these kinds of symbols which do, cut across millions of people. He also discusses money. Now, money is people sometimes say, well, is a social construct, that means it's not real. I mean, money is entirely made up. The only reason we trust this little piece of paper to do things with is because we believe it. We have this belief. And most of the time, we don't even have a piece of paper with us. We just have some numbers on our phone. And the next thing you know, we Venmo'd somebody and they give us something. Or we buy food with it. Right? That's really odd. I don't even know, like if you think about it, it's totally socially constructed. It's all just imaginary. Yet, boy, oh boy, it really helps to have a lot of those things, right? Sure can make your life different or better. I don't have any dollars on me, all right. Ah, Amy remembers. I was going to borrow $1 from you, Amy. We might do that later.
The worst thing in the world, though.
All right, don't spoil it. So it's important to know that people have learned behavior, that it's shared and contested, and that these symbols can have powerful effects on our lives. Can make the worst thing happen in the world to us. That's for sure, especially if you don't have any money. That culture changes, and in fact is always changing. And that it is done consciously and unconsciously, as Gus says. So some of it comes into us, a lot of culture comes into us we don't think about. But we can also bring these things to consciousness. So usually we don't think about how we think about old people. We just do it as we're marching along, carrying our little mental map, and we think, aha, there's somebody, and we have all these associations. But if we talk about them, we can bring them to consciousness, and we can think about them, and we can say, maybe I should change my mind. Maybe I should think about this. And this is something that can be done in any society. People talk about things, they think about things, and sometimes they change their mind. Again, a lot of it is unconscious. Now, remember that it is always interconnected. So, as much as we might like to portray other people as isolated and cut off, we are in fact connected to, we borrow from, we interact with other people. This has always been true. And if we keep all those things in mind, we'll be better off when it comes to culture. For Tiana and all anthropology professors everywhere, please, whenever there is the idea of culture, we should also be aware that there might be some power dynamics going on, both within that society and within and in relation to other societies that it is connected to. There's always power. Paige, you said something similar. That culture is always connected to power. And then you and Tiana both used a very big word, or it's not even a big word, but it has the sound of a big word. Remember that word?
Start with an H.
It does start with an H. Hegemony. It sounds like a big word. It's not very many letters, but it does have a lot of syllables in it. That's a 4-syllable word. Hegemony. Hegemony. Anybody seen this word before? Heard it? Now, this is a fun one. You have to get into some social science to do this. So, when we usually use the word power in our everyday life, we are usually often talking about power as coercive force, right? Somebody who can make me do something that I don't want to do. So we can talk about, for example, the coercive force of the police. Come in, put me in handcuffs, take me to jail. They have used coercive force to enforce something upon me. Now, that's one way, and it's an important part of power is the ability to coerce others into doing things. Not everybody can do that. But we can also think of power as this thing called hegemony. Now, when we in the social sciences use the word hegemony, we're usually talking about power in a special kind of way, which, as Guest puts it, is the ability of a dominant group to create consent and agreement within a population without the use of threat of force. So, if the police were to come in here right now and put handcuffs on me and take me to jail, what would you think? Yay, class is canceled. He's lost his mind. Well, I'll tell you what I would think. I would think, must have done something wrong. That person up there must have done something bad. I mean, I'm sad to say I'd probably think that if that happened right now to anybody, right? I mean, our natural idea, I think, maybe not everybody thinks this, but a lot of people would say, huh, that person did something wrong. That's why the police are here. That idea, even if I say I didn't do anything wrong, is hegemony. Basically, we agree that if the police come for you, you're bad, that you did something wrong, right? We kind of have that idea. That might be a stretch. Basically, well, let's let's bring in the person who actually kind of gave us this definition of hegemony, who it actually goes back to a Italian theorist named Antonio Gramsci, who's become something of a YouTube star these days. There's a YouTube of Antonio Gramsci that you can look up. Maybe because he's such a good-looking Italian guy. Look at that. There you go. Don't you think? No? Well, anyway, whether you think so or not, he's unfortunately gone. He was born in 1891 and actually was kind of a sad. He was sick a lot. In 1937, he only made it 46 years. Yeah, I know. So anyway, guess you get good pictures if you're young. But Gramsci was in jail at the time. He wrote, his most famous writings are called the Prison Notebooks. And some people believe that he used words like hegemony because he was trying to confuse the censors and get his writings out there, even though he was in jail. So he had to come up with like different words to convey his meaning. He was undoubtedly a smart guy, but he was in jail because he wanted a communist or a socialist revolution in Italy. And so he got thrown in jail because they didn't want him to be able to do that. Now, to give him credit, this was before people figured out that, like, you know, this was before communism took a really rough turn, we might say, but he was trying, and that's why he got thrown in jail. And the big question, one of the big questions he had while he was sitting there in jail is, given that Italian people, the Italian workers that I know are getting screwed over by capitalism, why aren't more people rising up and supporting the revolution? Right? It's actually a question that many people ask about the United States. Given the concentration of wealth in the hands of Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk and just a few people up there, and the rest of us down here and I don't know where, why aren't more people rising up and like trying to fight, right? Or overthrowing the system? And the idea he had was that in Italy and in many capitalist countries, the ruling class has been able to implement something like hegemony, where although people might not be directly benefiting from the system, they might be getting screwed over it, they nevertheless believe in it. I'm gonna be a billionaire one day, I know it. I'm almost there, I'm getting there. A few more years teaching at Hartwood College, I'm gonna hit the jackpot and boom, I'm gonna be on top of the world, right? American dream, I'm almost there. So even though you might not be experiencing this, you nevertheless believe that if you do everything right, you're going to be better looking than Antonio Gramsci and even more successful, and you'll be on top of the world. That was the other thing I found. A little poster that you can buy from this Redbubble guy named KJ Casey 1982. He makes a lot of funny things. Yes. Oh yeah. Sorry. It says that's hegemony, baby. So in this class, I asked for people to document the things that you needed to be a college student. None of you said that you needed a that's hegemony, baby poster.
Didn't know it existed. You
didn't know it existed. Now you know. Now you might put that on your list of things that you need on your wall. You can also get it as a t-shirt. Yeah.
Even better.
Even better, even better. But I'm trying to give credit where credit is due. There it will be. That's the medium size. There's also a small. All right. Why? Oh boy. Well, well. What to me this indicates is that consumer culture, oh, this is a different version of the word hegemony, hegemonic. consumer culture is so hegemonic, is so dominant, and we all agree upon it so much, right? We've all bought into it to the extent that dissent, right, has become a commodity. So there's Gramsci. Once he was thrown in jail and fighting a revolution. Now he's a t-shirt. He's a poster. It's something you can sell and buy. You may have seen this with the Che Guevara t-shirts or the Malcolm X hats, right? The people who were like the rebellious people are now on t-shirts and you can buy them. In fact, that's the best thing to do if you have a political opinion is go out and buy a t-shirt. You certainly want to wear this. Or as Billy Bragg said in his song, Great Leap Forward, revolution is just a t-shirt away, which you can now buy as a t-shirt. Yeah, that's the YouTube video of his official video, which is kind of fun if you want to quickly learn history. There's some JFK shots and Fidel Castro, and it's fun. I won't show it to you. This happens obviously on the left. It definitely happens, we've seen on the right as well. Whatever we have learned about Trump and his gang, we definitely have learned that they love to sell us stuff. They love to hawk things and sell things and get, stuff, merch, man. If you've got a political movement, make sure you've got the merch to go with it. So we've all in some ways, or I mean, consumer culture is something that is basically assumed, even on the political extremes, right? The places that you would say are the most extreme, those are the ones that seem most embedded in this system of selling things to people. So this brings us to, in your field work, I asked you for your three most important things, which we'll get to in a second. I asked you about the line between needs and wants. And then I asked you about people in other parts of the world. I want to start with the line between needs and wants. One of the wonderful insights of anthropology, and it's related, I think, to this idea of hegemony, because it's about how people are made to feel like they need something and sort of agree that they need it, even if they're not necessarily benefiting from that need. But one of the things that is wonderful about anthropology is it tells us that the things that we need or that we feel we need are actually socially or culturally created or built up as such. I want to give you a couple examples. Shampoo. Do you need shampoo? Is everybody basically in agreement? I'm in agreement too, by the way. However, I do know that only 2 generations ago in my own family, my grandfather grew up in this little part of Italy. And according to him, they took a bath in the river 3 times a year. Christmas, Easter, and the one time when they had this festival when they brought in a saint from somewhere into the town. And you'd all go down to the river and you'd take your 3-time-a-year bath, but the rest of the year, you didn't take a bath. Whereas somebody else in that family put it, in this country, they make me take a bath every week, whether I need it or not. Now, so it is clear to me, we probably didn't even have shampoo, that shampoo is not actually a need. We do not need it. It's just a want. Some of you are shaking your heads. Yeah, I mean, that's the problem, right? Is once you start shampooing your hair, then you have to keep doing it. Then it kind of becomes a need. If I don't do it, then you'll know it. And that's not nice, right? So, but it gets socially built in. It's not actually, in some ways, a human need. It does become, it feels like a need over time. Cell phones. Need or want? Really? None of you even mentioned the cell phone in your college list as one of your 3 most important things. Alex mentioned that you needed a phone charger, but you didn't mention that you needed a phone. I was confused about that one, Alex.
What are you gonna charge?
I mean, true, your phone is probably useless if you don't have the charger. But I was curious that you only told me about the charger, not the phone itself. Why didn't you say that you needed a cell phone as one of your 3 things? I think that's one of my 3 things. Yeah. I don't know. No. What? No, that's not right. I have to text people upstairs and downstairs in my own house. What do you mean walk over? Yes. Why didn't you mention the cell phone as a need? Nobody did. Or a want even. Now you said it's a want, but I know it's not a want. We all know it's a need. Right, Charlene? Why not? Or why?
I feel like I associated it with like social media rather than like the actual communication piece of it. You know, it's like what I thought. It's like that. I want because it's social media. It's like entertainment, but
Oh, yeah. I mean, I guess I do. I mean, I think I didn't put smartphone there because that kind of changed things. But like that basic texting and thing, I'm going to say that the reason you didn't list it is because it's not actually special to being a college student at all. It's basically a human need. It's something we just need. We might as well issue them at birth to people because you need it. I may be exaggerating. Well, Alex, you said that in other countries, people don't carry these phones around as much. Is that true?
yeah. So I thought about it, but I just didn't write it.
I don't know. Has anybody gone to a place that you might consider to be a poorer place than the one we're in and seen how surprising it is how many people are carrying 1 or 2 or 3 phones around on them? Wait, Alex, what happened?
I went to Peru. And only a select amount of people had phones, but you could tell that they were higher up in society. So people weren't carrying around phones unless they were dressed up or working at a hotel or something like that.
Huh. I don't know. That was not my experience in Ecuador and Colombia and Bolivia. So I'd have to think about Peru because I haven't been there. But in my experience, people were carrying usually at least 1 phone all over the place, maybe 2 or 3. Yeah. Paris.
Part that I'm in is
Uh-huh.
but everybody has phones. They might not have hot water or water at all.
They might not have water, but they have a phone. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, no, it's interesting in the places that, well, in some of these places, they actually got cell phones faster than in the United States because it's hard to put in landline infrastructure. it's hard to lay those cables or put those wires in. And so once the cell phone technology came out, people got really excited because you didn't have to do that. You just put up one tower and then you got your cell phone. So one of my colleagues went, I think he was in Senegal in Africa, and he was like, yeah, people have like 3 phones because they want to make sure whatever network is working. So if the phone rings, they'd be like checking one part, you know, they'd be ringing on different parts of their body because they'd be carrying 2 or 3 phones around. They also, in countries that like that, they also were texting and probably invented texting before we did in the United States. Why would they text? Why would you want to do that if you were in a place like that? It's been a long time since you had to pay for those cell phone minutes to talk, but minutes were expensive, right? So if you could text, it was a cheaper way to use the phone. So what's interesting is that in some ways, the cell phone technology became rapidly adapted as a need. Bon and Bao, who I think might be on the alumni wall up there in the library, wrote a book. He's a Hartwick alum, and came to this campus to talk about how your phone has changed your life. And he gave this surprising, or people got surprised by this statistic. He said, I forget what it was. 80% of the world has a toothbrush, but 95% of the world has a cell phone. Yeah.
I mean, if I'm gonna be honest, realistically, like, there are places where they use, I don't know what it's called, that like stick thing that they use in a toothbrush, but you would just like chew it. You know what I'm talking about, right?
Well, I know, but I believe you. So you're not surprised by this statistic.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, we shouldn't have been surprised. I mean, it sounds surprising because a toothbrush sounds like this basic need for you, like a human need, like shampoo or something. But in fact, we shouldn't have been surprised. They might have those things. Or for those of you who've been in biological anthropology classes, who has the best teeth in the world? The least cavities? Phone a friend? Oh no, we're way far up on the cavity. I mean, where do you get those cavities from? Yeah, why do we need toothbrushes anyway? What is it that we eat that we have to brush off? All those sugars, right? Right. Well, that's why we're talking about coffee and sugar and all those things. Yeah, and my dentist says that I have to use a special whitening toothpaste because it's too much coffee and tea. So now I have to double it up, man, get that stuff that burns your teeth, you know. No, it's when you start consuming processed foods and sugars and all those things. The people with the best teeth in history were the hunters and gatherers, or are the hunters and gatherers. If you eat that gritty food and, you know, it's not very processed and you don't have a lot of sugars in it, you don't even need to brush your teeth. You'll be fine. You'll have great teeth. It's only when you introduce sugars and carbs into their diets that people all of a sudden their teeth start to decay and then they need to go to the dentist and brush their teeth. So basically, I would say that the toothbrush is a social, you know, it's a created need, but the cell phone, now that is a true human need. Even the hunters and gatherers need cell phones because why?
Where they have to test the animals before they kill them.
Well, you have to text another animal. I mean, another hunter, sorry. You have to tell them, you know, it's a basic human need to communicate. Language is much older than toothbrushing. Let's put it that way. So, you know, we shouldn't have been surprised by this. Communication is basic. All right, your list. Things that were mentioned more than once. The laptop is the winner. 6 of you mentioned that you needed a laptop. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And there are 7 of them. 8. No, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 laptops in the class. That all college students need a laptop. close second almost was tied, but then the tie was broken. The backpack, essential to being a college student. Third, something to write with or on, some sort of writing thing, a pen, a pencil, something like that. And the only other thing that was mentioned twice as essential, or more than once, was a fan. This was new to me. Do we need a fan? Having a fan essential to college life?
How hot it is.
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of frightening to me, actually. I mean, several of you mentioned that, you know, there are a lot of places who do not have the infrastructure to deal with the heat. We might be one of them, but by next week it'll get cold again and we'll be okay. But in other places, it's very difficult. And the other thing that's scary about this, of course, is if we say, okay, fine, you need fans or you need air conditioning. Well, what's it going to do when all those air conditioners that people are going to want, what do those do? Besides cool things off. How do you cool things off? When I'm running my air conditioner, what does it take up? Yes. It's also burning lots of fossil fuels, and so it actually contributes to the problem, right? Every time I turn my air conditioner on, it's pumping out more stuff into the world. So, you know, if you think about a place like India and the 1.3 billion people who is projected in the next little bit are going to be under extreme heat conditions, and think about the needs both in infrastructure and what kind of energy use that might take up. It's kind of frightening. Anyway, this is your list. I was interested in this, and I was interested in how you compared it to different parts of the world. And one of the reasons I was interested in this is because of something that Trouillot wrote back in 2003. And he wrote that prompted by global media, more human beings than ever before share similar lists of the products they need to consume and the objects they need to possess in order to achieve individual satisfaction. What he's saying here is that we have this consumer culture which has become hegemonic around the globe, and that means that more people than ever before have this list of things that they have. We continue to say, in that sense, we are truly witnessing for the first time, especially among the youth, a global production of desire. The things you want are probably going to be shared by people like you around the world. Now, I've always been interested in this, perhaps puzzled by it, wondering if it's truly true, if it's still happening. Like I said before, are we still globalizing? Are these lists the same? Will we